Greetings. Welcome to another episode of Clear Thinking with Brother Dulani. Welcome, family. First, I would like to ask you to just like, subscribe to this channel. It's free to subscribe, by the way. There's no cost, absolutely no cost. What we are aiming to do is to bring clarity, is to bring an African perspective to the global discussion and to issues facing African people. That is our primary objectives. So, but we need your support in order to grow so we can provide an alternative voice within the atmosphere, within the social media, within the internet, where information is flowing constantly. We need to ensure that we have a voice that stand on clarity, that stand on our liberation struggle, that stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. And I have put myself forward to assist in providing that clear alternative to a lot of the mess, foolishness, and distraction that exists across social media. So I want to encourage you to just subscribe, follow, and also to comment, engage with this platform so we can grow and we can be able to provide an alternative or at the very least a counterbalance to a lot of the false narrative being pushed in our community. This week we're going to be countering a narrative that I came across. It was brought to my attention by Brother Shakara, one of our great Pan-African scholar in the UK. He has a YouTube channel called Kibonga Media. It used to be Got Kush TV. Now it's Kimbonga Media. And he was given his response to a show that was presented on Search for Uhuru by a channel by a young brother named Dinus Amir. Now, I used to watch that brother back a couple of years back when he used to go to Africa, he go to Ivory Coast, he go to Nigeria, and he went on his journey to be initiated into the system, into the secret society of Africa. And yeah, I was impressed with his journey. But as I begin to listen carefully, excuse me, as I begin to observe him, I begin to notice that this brother has some views that maybe need to be looked at closely. He seems to, be articulating a very conservative message, a conservative political ideology. And I've noticed that about him. He's very subtle with it because at the same time, he has a Pan-African tendency and he rejects the isolationists of America, especially Black America. I noticed that he opposed the FBA, the so-called Foundation of Black America, a cult created by Tariq Nasheed. He has rejected that, and he has devoted many of his shows on his platform to refuting them, to kind of refute a lot of their argument, you know what I mean, and dismantle a lot of their foolishness. And I give him credit for that. However, he seems to align himself with a political conservative view, closer to the MAGA movement. I would call him like a black MAGA or black MAGA adjacent, when they're close to each other. His views is very similar to a lot of these black MAGA tendencies that you see goes on across America with black people who openly support Donald Trump and his policy and what he's doing. Very weird indeed. But and I have actually pulled away from his platform. I've observed him from a distance, and I see him on my timeline from time to time. I do wish I could engage on his platform with him and his audience more, to give a counterbalance and to bring clarity to what is Pan-Africanism, what is socialism, what is African liberation, because they distort all these issues. And if you listen how they describe African liberation struggle, how they describe the political system that African people embrace, you will get a distorted view. And there seems to be exalting capitalism, bigging up capitalism, like capitalism, like it is the wonder of the world, it is the panacea, it is the cure-all. And if only our African leaders just embrace capitalism, prosperity will reign in Africa. That is the impression that they give. They're not going to tell you in these clear terms, but I'm telling you, uh, this is how they are pitching. This is how the propaganda is, how they promote it to us, that somehow we are kind of weird or silly for want to embrace socialism. So we're going to get into this presentation. I put together a presentation that I'm just going to use as a guide to kind of like show you some of the fallacies and the distortion and to bring clarity to the issue. So if I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you some of the false narrative that they're pushing. Uh, let me go up. See if we are. Okay. So reclaiming African socialism. This is what this is. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so sure we can see that now. Hopefully you'll be seeing the screen next to me. This is a masterclass response to false narrative about our liberation ideology. My name is Brother Dulani, and this channel is called Clear Thinking, and I'm on YouTube and I'm on TikTok, so you can check me out there. And do leave a comment and tell me what you think about this. Now, we got to confront this false narrative. Here was the title of his presentation, and the title was What's Black People's Obsession with Socialism and Failed Dictators. So that was the premise. A very distorted premise, very, it meant to make you feel ashamed. It meant to make you feel like you're weak or something is wrong with you to to be obsessed with socialism. Now, he would never say he's obsessed with capitalism, but we are obsessed with socialism because we refuse to accept capitalism. So this deceptive question promotes a shallow, ahistorical narrative designed to make us feel ashamed of our liberation ideology and disconnect us from ideologies rooted in our own culture. So it's an attempt to sell us a capitalist system built on our ancestors' grave. This is how they are trying to promote this idea of capitalism and at the same time denigrate our embracing of socialism to make us seem as if we got an obsession with socialism, but they somehow have a healthy relationship with capitalism. So let's move right along. So today, we are not merely responding, we are reclaiming our story. This is a master class on the African definition of socialism, the historical context of our struggle, and why this path remains essential for our sovereignty and future development. We will dismantle the false narrative with facts, scholarship, and clarity. Now, they mentioned in their broadcast in the channel, they went on a very long time discussing Julius Nyerere of Tanzania and how he failed the socialism that he practiced in Tanzania, how it failed the people of Tanzania. This is the claim, and how it was a failed system. But we must destroy this central fallacy that socialism, and then they also try to let's put it in context. The socialism that Julius Nyerere implemented was not socialism as we know it as a European form created by Karl Marx. This is a socialism rooted in African history and values. Ujamaa was the form was cooperative economics. That was the form of socialism that Julius Nyerere advocated from, taking it from our history, taking from our traditional society and values, and implementing it for our development. So, Ujamaa is not a European import. We must destroy this central fallacy that socialism is a foreign ideology to Africa. No, it's not. This is intellectual colonialism. The European socialism of Marx was analytical and industrial, and in focus on class struggle in factories and in industrialized countries. Now, we have to look at our own situation in Africa and devise a system that is relevant to African problems. So the African socialism of Nyerere, of Nkrumah, of Thomas Sankara was fundamentally different from that which was practiced in Europe or was advocated in Europe. The one that the one that was embraced and developed by African liberators was a one that based on restorative and communal basis. It was rooted in pre-colonial African values and social structures. African socialism represents a return to indigenous economic philosophy, adapted to the modern context of nation building and development. What are they saying here? That African leaders didn't just blindly embrace socialism that was prescribed to them. When we liberated ourselves from the yoke of colonialism, we have a choice in which way we're going to go. The liberation fighters had a had a had a had a choice, had a decision to make. Are we going to go the route of the capitalist system, the system that exploited us, that beat us, that mangled us, that promoted inequality, that extracted the wealth from our society? The system was built on our enslavement. Or are we going to embrace a system that is rooted in our own African experience before the colonialists arrived in Africa? Many of our African freedom fighters embrace an African socialistic system to move us forward because it was more aligned with our African values. And that is exactly what happened. Now, in Tanzania, the Ujamaa philosophy of familyhood was established and was promoted and it was implemented. This is what Julius Nyerere had to say about what Tanzania attempt to do. Julius Nyerere says that Tanzania will build a society in which all members have equal rights and equal opportunities, in which all can live at peace with their neighbors without suffering or imposing injustice, being exploited or exploiting. There's a fundamental difference here that we want to build a society with equal rights and equal opportunities. That is the key, where everyone can benefit. But this is not the way capitalism works. Capitalism is based on greed and individualism. African socialism is based on collective development, where everyone can benefit, everyone can participate in our economic development. Now, Julius Nyerere did not say that Tanzania failed because of socialism. That is a gross distortion. They played a clip, an interview on Search for Uhuru, Dinas Emir. He tries to falsely claim that Nyerere admit that the socialism failed in and the Ujamaa failed and and badly and it was a really distorted reflection. But when they played the interview, Julius Nyerere did not say that. The reporter was asking him if it was a failure, and he says, "Of course, it's not a failure. There are some of the implementation, some of the policies, some of the way it was implemented had problems, but that's not a condemnation of the vision, a condemnation of the entire system of socialism. It was just that certain aspect was implemented in a way where it was ahead of his time. So, and he clearly clarify that. And you can go on Julius Nyerere, search for Uhuru YouTube channel, and you can listen for yourself. And he never agreed that Tanzania failed because of socialism. He explicitly stated that Ujamaa was based on traditional African familyhood, sharing resources, collective responsibility, and mutual respect. The philosophy drew from centuries of African communal living, not European Marxist theory. Ujamaa aimed to modernize African communalism while maintaining its core value of mutual aid and collective responsibility and collective prosperity. It was an authentically African approach to development. They always want us to adapt other people's way. They say either you're going to adopt Marx, or you're going to adapt the Europeans, or you're going to adapt capitalism, or you're going to adapt, you know, system that was imposed on us. Ujamaa is an African system based on African reality and African history and value, and that is the difference. So, understanding the real challenges of Ujamaa. Now, if you're going to do an analysis, and if you're going to do an accurate um, analysis or reporting on Ujamaa, you have to look at what happened. What are some of the factors that affected Tanzania when they were implementing this political and economic system in the 70s? One of the factors that was happening at the time, there was an environmental crisis at the time. There was severe drought across East Africa, including Ethiopia, including Kenya, and including Uganda, and many parts of East Africa was experiencing severe drought, and it impacted agricultural production in the mid 70s. So that is one of the things that they trying to blame socialism for, because a lot of the crop didn't bring the level of production that was expected. There was there was a shortfall, but that was because of an economic impact. It's like for saying that a hurricane hit Jamaica, and therefore those 6 parishes that was hit cannot function, and you're going to blame the government of Jamaica, or you're going to blame the economic system for the collapse of that area. You cannot be accurate. You cannot be fair and just if you're going to use. You're not going to look at these factors and it's going to blame the economic system. Also, at the time, there was a global oil shocks. In 1973, oil oil crisis. Uh, it devastated Tanzania economy and impact and import capacity. So you have to look at that. Oil prices affect the price of goods. It affects the inflation in your country. So, you got to look at all these factors, the environmental factors, the global oil price at the time, and inflations of goods, and the ability and your capacity to import goods at a higher cost. Also, the collapse in export prices. International commodity price dropped, plummeted, and destroyed revenue. So whatever natural resources you have, and if you're exporting it, and suddenly the market price drop and plummeted, you're going to get less revenue coming into your country to build your economy. The system in Tanzania suffered just like many systems around the world were suffering at the time because of this. Um, there were some implementation errors. The forced villagization, the forced, um, they use a word called villagization um, to describe it, but it was like a forced communal living where you bring a lot of people, you relocate people to one area to build a particular village life where you try to make this society into a cohesive society. And some of it was forced, some of it was you know, was was coerced, and as a result, a lot of people use that to say that is the reason why it failed. But the failure often cited was forced villagization in the mid-70s, a policy implementation error under immense external pressure. The ideology of Ujamaa, communal economics and self-reliance, was not the failure. Nyerere himself later critiqued these methods, not the underlying philosophy. We must separate flawed execution from sound principle. So that particular policy of forcing people into a particular area to carry out particular modes of production, the way it was implemented, it never went as planned, because you need to also have a high level of production, you need to have high level of export, you need to have all these other factors working. With a drought going on, the revenue from goods that's been exported um, is going down. The oil crisis in the world causing problems. So a lot of things was impacted. Import was impacted. Export was impacted. The production of goods and services in Tanzania was impacted, and therefore they blame it on the whole idea of this forced collectivization, villagization that was implemented in Tanzania. So let's define what is Ujamaa, meaning familyhood or cooperative economics. In Kwanzaa, we have Ujamaa as cooperative economics or collective work and responsibility. So in Swahili, uh, Tanzania's social development policy under Julius Nyerere was called Ujamaa. It promoted self-reliant, communal living, Ujamaa villages, collective farming, and nationalization to build an egalitarian society based on African values. Now, egalitarian means a society that's based on equality and justice for all. So if you got corporations in your country, if you got production going on in your country, it should be benefiting to the majority and not just for the handful of owners and capitalists. So Ujamaa is promoting this type of communal living, hence the villages that they wanted to create, all these villages. So you bring people from these outposts and these remote regions, and you bring them to live together as one. I mean, it is a good aim, but sometimes it's difficult to control human and to get them to follow along on these massive grand ideas. And forcing people to live somewhere new is never easy under any circumstances. So it was aiming for a shared prosperity and community-led development. But ultimately, it faced challenges with forced resettlement, low production, and economic decline, though it fostered national unity. So we mentioned the challenges that Ujamaa faced, this forced resettlement into these villages that they created to carry out this work. The collective farming, the industrialization, the building of factories, and all these things was built in different towns and cities and communities, but it was forced. And I think that was one of uh, the errors of that policy, and also low production due to the drought. We can't leave out the drought, and also the import issue with oil and the export of goods. That kind of collapse. So all these stuff led to economic decline, but in all of that, it created a national vibration, what I mean, a national unity within Tanzania. And that philosophy is still embraced today in Tanzania. So we're looking at very precise analysis of socialism in Africa, in particular in Tanzania. As an example, because they used Tanzania, they used Julius Nyerere words, twisted his words, and Dinas Emir didn't even apologize and acknowledge that he totally misrepresented um, the position and the stance of Julius Nyerere. You know what I mean? In terms of the way he categorized it on his show. And if you go back and you watch his show, you'll see exactly how he characterized socialism and Julius Nyerere, as failure. So, but we as African people, we have our own philosophy. We have our own agency as African people. We have our own Ubuntu. See, I am because we are. That is a collective thinking. That means that if I benefit, you benefit. If we benefit, I benefit. If I benefit, we benefit. It's a fundamental different approach to living than in, say, a capitalist mode of thinking, a capitalist society that is based on individualism. I say Ubuntu is not merely a slogan, it represents a complete economic and social philosophy. Is based is that our humanity is fundamentally independent. That the community, everyone in the community is interdependent, where we rely on each other. Individual success means nothing if the community suffers. So one man want to have billions and billions of dollars while the vast majority of the people suffer. That is not right. That's not justice. But this is what capitalism promotes. And this is what I think Dinas Emir and those who trying to criticize socialism is trying to promote. Personal wealth accumulation whilst your neighbor starve, while your neighbor live in poverty, while your fellow citizen living in squalors. To me, that should be considered a moral failure on a monumental scale, along as homelessness and poverty and inequality, and our elders are living in deplorable condition. Our children are without nourishment and proper education. These things should never happen while individuals are owning billions and billions of dollars in wealth. This philosophy informs an economic system across Southern Africa for centuries before European contact with us. It created society with built-in social safety net, mutual aid networks, and shared prosperity. That is how African people was living before European arrived in Africa. And it's important that we understand this as African people. So we are under no illusion about what socialism mean to us or what capitalism mean to us and whatever criticism there may be. But one thing for sure, it's about our sovereignty. It's about we as a people determine our own destiny. And we're always going to want justice and equality for our people. And we're not going to get justice, equality, and eliminate poverty and homelessness with capitalism. Capitalism is based on exploitation, is based on inequality, is based on individual accumulation of wealth at the expense of the majority. That is fundamental to capitalism. And we will go into other aspects of development that sometimes people are confusing with capitalism. Now, across Africa, you got like the Akan familyhood. The Ghanaian got a system that emphasize communal wealth management and shared lineage. The Ibukwe. Now, Buke is another system in the Igbo society. I mean, there's strength in community. It's all about collectivity. Harambe. I'm sure a lot of us I've heard of Harambe. It's an East African tradition of collective self-help and communal work. In Jamaica, we have a big tune. I think it's by Marcia Griffith called Harambe. Harambe. I mean, let's pull together. Harambe is highly celebrated in our culture. Also, we have partners that there's a lot of people used to throw, and susu, which is a way of our economic within the Western world, pooling our resources to empower each other, and it's based on trust. You know what I mean? Where we all benefit, we all throw together in a collective pot, and we reap that pot. Everybody get a chance to reap, and then you can build, you can buy your house, you can buy your car, you can make investment in business. These are things that we develop as a sovereign people, as a people that are facing struggles, and we have to find ingenious ways of surviving. So we have developed a lot of these systems along the way to cope in the Western world, particularly within the diaspora. So we have the challenge of decolonizing our economics. So African socialism wasn't about importing Karl Marx. It was about decolonizing our economies and returning to a state where community well-being supersede individual greed. It is an attempt to modernize our inherent communalism, our communal society, because African society is inherently communal. We are a loving people, a caring people that believes in collective wealth sharing. So post-independent leaders recognize that adapting wholesale the capitalist system of our colonizer would perpetuate continuous exploitation. So they couldn't do that. After we liberate ourselves from these capitalists, then we turn around and embrace their system. What kind of sense does that make? They sought instead to adapt traditional African communal values to the modern state, and within the context of a modern state, adapting those traditional values with the modern context, creating a hybrid system that honor our past while building our future. That is what the African leaders, many of them, attempt to do. This was a revolutionary thinking, rejecting both colonial capitalism and the Soviet-style communism in favor of an authentic African path. So didn't go straight Bolsheviks or straight, Adam Smith and straight capitalists, hardcore capitalists, cutthroat capitalism. They didn't go that route of, the colonial capitalism. And they could not go that route. The same system that exploited us and oppressed us and extracted our wealth and enslaved us and colonized us, we could not embrace that system for our liberation. So we choose an African path forward, and we rightly done so, and we have the right to do so. So, the historical imperative, why socialism was a logical choice. So post-independence leader didn't choose socialism in a vacuum. They chose it as the only coherent response to 500 years of racial capitalism. The foundation of capitalism, you got to understand, European and American capitalism thrive for centuries on a tripartite system. One, forced labor, free forced labor through the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved African, stolen land and resources through colonization or colonialism. So most of the land that they occupied and that they colonized was stolen land from even the Americas, the North and South and Central America, the Caribbean, Africa, many parts of Asia. Those were stolen land, and the resources in those lands were stolen, including the people were stolen and enslaved and forced into free labor camp, or what you call concentration camp, around the world, particularly in the Caribbean and the Americas. So those are the two factors of capitalism, and the other one is a captive market that enrich European monopolies, because when they have conquered a lot of these areas of the world, they were able to be the one to supply goods and service to those areas. So they had a captive market that depended completely on the European import. After they extracted the raw material, they take it to Europe or some other outposts in the Caribbean or the Americas, and they would manufacture them and convert them into consumer goods, and then they would send them back into those colonies and sell them and make a handsome profit, and become wealthy. So the wealth that built London, New York, Brussels was extracted from our bodies and our continents. And now, after that, you're telling us that we must adapt the same system that subjugated us. That is unacceptable. This is the same system that was used to extract wealth from our land to go and build those so-called colonial powers, their society and their country, and industrialize them while we was left in shambles and poverty and languishing and failed economic policy after policy because we were not considered important enough to develop. The idea of developing the colonies was not a priority. It was only developed in as much as they can extract the wealth. So the railway, the road system, the waterway, the ports, they were all built to extract wealth from the colonies, not to develop the colonies and interconnect the people them in those areas and make the people them safe and create infrastructures for them like schools and hospitals and community centers. No, no, no. That was not it. The most you're going to get is a church or two, but you know, and that's not a priority. So the challenges that was inherited in the colonial states was, again, I mentioned to the extraction economy. That was the economy that we inherited. Colonial economies, they were designed solely for resource extraction to benefit European industries with no local value addition or manufacturing capacity. They brought most of those resources to Europe and to the Americas, North America in particularly, to be manufactured and then sent back to other places in the world. So, and then most of the colonies was into what you call monocrops, one crop, maybe one or two. It's a single cash crop for export. So you create a lot of vulnerability to global price fluctuations and food insecurity when you only focus on one crop. So if that crop failed, you're at mercy of whatever forces that exist because you have no other way of making an income. And therefore, you can leave yourself susceptible to starvation, susceptible to hunger, you know, and so forth like that. And another legacy of colonialism is these arbitrary borders. These colonial powers, especially during the Berlin Conference, they drew up the map of Africa and split it up into pieces. And to this very day, we are maintaining these colonial borders. So this is part of the colonial legacy, and you know, the elite. There is actually, we can't deny the fact that an African elite was left behind wherever they were. I mean, whatever they were in South America or the Caribbean, the colonial powers, they would train an African elite or an African management class to serve the imperial interest, to serve the colonial interest. Um, uh, Not to build a sovereign nation and serve their own people. So the leadership was not there to build a sovereignty, peoplehood, or to restore our people to their African roots or to their African personality in the world and their position in the world, but they were there to serve the interests of the colonial powers, and they was highly trained for that. So the new African state inherited colonial economies designed for extraction, designed for taking your wealth, not for your own development. These structural impediments meant that simply adapting capitalism would perpetuate dependency and underdevelopment. A radical restructuring was necessary. And that is one thing that we have to keep in mind, that we could not keep embracing this system of extraction, it would do us no good. All we would be doing is building up the European countries, the exploiters, the colonizers, making them stronger while we remain weak and vulnerable and at their mercy. That's not a recipe for progress. Socialism, African socialism, was the only logical choice available to us as a people, based on the factors that I've just explained to you. So the ideological battlefield of the Cold War, African nations coming out of colonialism, we had a few choices to make. And a few of the choices was, um, you know, Western hostility or the non-aligned movement. So the West often supported the former colonial masters, um, was hostile to truly independent African state. The moment you're talking about equality and justice and take control of your resources and to be self-sufficient, the moment you start talking like that, you be faced with economic sanctions and coup and assassination attempt. These became tools to punish sovereignty. Anybody that want to be truly independent and truly control your destiny, you become targets for assassination. The CIA and European intelligence services actively work to destabilize progressive African government that threaten neo-colonial interests. The moment you start talking about, we must control our resources, just as you see our brothers are doing in the Sahel with Mali and Niger and Burkina Faso, are they uniting as the AES, as the Sahel states, are trying to control their resources and trying to develop their country rapidly. The entire Western world is organizing against them. Coup is organized against them. Sanction is organized against them. And there have been many assassination attempts, particularly on our brother Abraham Traore, who's been under constant attack since he took power and began the revolutionary process in Burkina Faso and the Sahel states. So that is a classic example in this ideological battlefield, where, you're constantly in danger. Anytime you take a path to move towards a socialist path, you'll be under threat and you'll be undermined. They will use every form of propaganda to make you look bad. And I want to say this because I'm responding to this show, this, what is Black people obsession with socialism, and it was promoted by Dinas Emir. I want to take this opportunity to to be critical of some of the antics that I see goes on in there. He bring on this brother on there called Brendan a lot. And Brendan is one who tries to denigrate and downgrade anything that Black people is doing, any independence that Black people trying to practice, any sovereignty that Black people trying to put forward as a path for our development. He's highly critical of it, and he's very disrespectful and nasty with his rhetoric. I would love the opportunity to challenge him with his nasty and distorted propaganda against African revolutionary process. I look forward to that. He also called himself Pan-African Strike Back. I don't know what that is. He's just a caricature of Pan-Africanism and distorting what he's the total opposite of what a Pan-African is and what Pan-Africanism is about. He's also a big defender of the MAGA movement and Donald Trump. And Dinas Emir constantly parade him on his channel, give him the platform to spew his nonsense. And because many of the opponents that Dinas bring on his platform, they're not capable of countering him. They're not capable of using, of coming off their head with the history, with the facts, with the dates, with the time, with the things that needed to refute these kind of people. Because they would come on there and they would razzle-dazzle you and use their little disrespectful talk and language to make you look like you're an idiot. But if you know your history and you know what's going on, you can easily refute them. So, yes, and they would pretend like none of this is happening. when you become a truly independent African state and control your resources, there will be no economic sanction. There will be no coup attempt. There will be no assassination attempt. The CIA and other European intelligence service, they wouldn't try to actively try to destabilize your progressive movement or your government. They would not do that. No, no, that's not happening. Whatever's happening is only your fault. It's because you didn't embrace capitalism, and that is the reason why you fail. That is the kind of that's what ideas that they promote. They promote these type of things to make us feel ashamed to embrace African socialism, to embrace Ujamaa, to embrace our own values, our communal way of life, as if somehow capitalism has this fountain of prosperity, and if we only drink from this fountain, everything will be all right. It's just total nonsense. So, back in the 60s and 70s, the many of those freed African countries, matter of fact, as early as back in the 50s, they decided to take the non-aligned path, which is socialism after the path of non-alignment, particularly in uniting with the Asian independent countries back in the 1955 at the Bandung conference. They decided to form this non-aligned movement, uh, which you know and to focus on building rapid development. And it was state-led rapid development to build infrastructure, to build schools, to build hospitals, things that the colonial regime never provided. It was a tool for nation building and resisting neo-colonial control. So socialism was that mechanism that we can pour tremendous amount of resources and energy into massive and rapid development of our infrastructure. But even that was sabotage, as we will learn. Examples of purpose-driven development. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, he used the state planning to build the Akosombo Dam on the Volta River project, creating energy independence and industrial capacity. The dam provided electricity for aluminum smelting and regional power distribution. That's one of Kwame Nkrumah's great works, and even that was sabotage. There was a time when they tried to blow up the dam to try to make him look like a failure. Sabotage. Thomas Sankara, in just 4 years, his socialist oriented policies vaccinated over 2.5 million children and planted over 10 million trees to stop deforestation. And he built railways, he built roads, and he championed women's rights in revolutionary ways. Within just 4 years, and they assassinated him as well. They assassinated Kwame Nkrumah. Well, they overthrew him, and then eventually died. Um, But what they do, what this does, it demonstrated that when you are committed, it can be done. Sankara proved that focused, that what he proved that if when you're focused on your sovereignty, your communal effort, you can achieve a lot when government prioritize people over profit and development over debt repayment to foreign banks. Thomas Sankara proved that was possible. And what they did, they eliminated him. So we cannot um, talk about socialism, without talking about the context and all of the effort to destabilize African people in the attempt to build an African society for their own benefit. So you may ask, what is the proof? What is the modern proof? They often say, show us a state where socialism has worked. And you hear the criticism. Socialism have never worked, and they beat their chests. Well, we said, what about China? China is a socialist country. Matter of fact, China is a communist country. Last time I checked, it was the People's Republic of China. And they base their system on communism. It's the Communist Party of China that runs China. They're trying to gloss over it and trying to pretend that that's not the case. They're always trying to minimize that part and pretend, oh, China, they mention China as if China is just another capitalist country. But the narrative claims socialism equal poverty and failure is a false narrative. They're trying to they're trying to paint that picture that if you mention socialism, that if you implement socialism in your country, it equals that your country will be failure. It will be based on poverty and homelessness, and people will be dying in the streets. But let's examine the evidence with clear eyes and honest assessment. We must ask the difficult question: which African countries have achieved genuine development under the pure neoliberal capitalist model prescribed by the IMF and World Bank since the 1980s? Which one? Give us an African country. Because these neoliberal, they tell you know, um, here's a classic part of the neoliberal agenda. Neoliberal policy will tell you that you focus on the private sector. You allow the private sector to thrive. You lower the taxes and you give them room to operate, and they will build up prosperity for everybody. And many African and Afrobean, which is Caribbean countries, have tried that formula, but none of them have been able to bring about any genuine development or prosperity based on this pure neoliberal capitalist model, where you borrow money from the IMF, you borrow money from the World Bank, and instead of spending the money on schools and hospitals and infrastructure, you turn around and you loan that money to the private sector, to the banks, to the manufacturers, to the wholesalers, to the to those people who are building businesses, and that is how your country will develop. Forget about the schools, forget about the hospitals for now, forget about all those things. And then what happens is that a handful of people will be getting rich in your country, and then the vast majority will be suffering. Homelessness will continue to exist, poverty will continue to grow, unemployment would continue to be a big problem. So you tend to be maintaining the same difficulty, even though you will have a few more rich people in the society, a few more will be benefiting on the ownership side. The vast majority, in terms of education, you will not be getting significant improvement because you don't have the finance to invest in those infrastructure, and there is no profit. And they would even go as far as telling you, privatize your school system. If poor people want to go to school, they have to pay for it. If poor people want to build a hospital, they have to pay for it. So you can't have free medical care, you can't have free schooling, you can't have free roads, you have to pay toll to drive on the road. So these are the neoliberal policies where the people have to pay for every single thing along the way. And if you can't afford, you can't participate. So the participation in the new economy is based on your ability to afford to be able to participate. So if you happen to be born poor or born without land, you're going to remain that way because you cannot participate in this new economy based on neoliberal policies if you don't have a finance, if you don't have land, if you don't have collateral to participate, you're going to be at a detriment. And because of our situation, our unique situation as African people, being what we have been through ideologically and culturally in Africa and in the Caribbean, our cultural development has been hampered with, has been damaged, has been tampered with. It has been damaged. It has been affected. Our ideological and social development has been tampered with. And we have a lot of psychological issues resulting from years of brutality, years of cultural damages attempt to erase our culture, erase our history, erase our identity. There's been great effort at that, at destroying the self-esteem of African people, particularly in the diaspora, where we was forbidden from reading, forbidden from writing, forbidden from learning, especially our history, speaking our languages, and to know who we are. We still have to recover from that. So these are some of the issues that is unique to African people. We are forced to speak a foreign land. We are forced to learn in a foreign language, and we are trying to rebuild within the context of a foreign domination politically and ideologically and culturally. So our situation is a little bit unique in those regards. So we have to be careful about just embracing this policy without addressing the damage of enslavement, without addressing the damage of colonialism, and without and also addressing the need for reparative justice. Our economies from across Africa and the Caribbean, Central and South America, who have been damaged, and the people who are, most importantly, the people who have been damaged by enslavement and colonization need reparative justice to heal from that damage. So, along with our economy that needs to be fixed or developed, we also have to develop the people and to restore our cultural identity and our cultural heritage and values, which we have lost a lot of it during the last 500 years. So these are some of the things that we have to address as we move forward. The colonial powers who were responsible for the enslavement of African people and the colonization of African people would need to address the issue of reparative justice and to begin to bring about some type of redress for the damages that they have done for our people. Reparative justice has to be a part of the agenda moving forward. The wealth that was accumulated in the last 500 years, a major portion of that wealth would need to be redistributed to bring about the repairing of the planet, to repairing of the damages that they have done, and particularly repairing of the damages that they have done to African people. The whole brutality of enslavement, colonization, the cultural genocide that were carried out against our people. We need reparative justice. They must be held accountable. We must keep that front and square and focus about it as we move forward. So I just wanted to put that on the agenda while we address this issue. So as we move along, so we talk about the neoliberal policies. They got the structural adjustment program, and this this is the program they use to dismantle state developmental role. In other words, like I mentioned earlier, they want the government to come out of the development business and give it to private entities. What that does, it favors these foreign investors, these multinational corporations. Um, some of them even goes using these big foreign contractors to come in to build your country for you. So they will give you the loan, and you agree to pay back X percentage on the loan, but they're telling you that you have to spend this money on these corporations to come in, whether they're going to build the roads, or they're going to build electricity for you, or they're going to build your digital infrastructure, or your ports. Whatever they're going to be, they're telling you who you must choose. These are the list of providers that you need to go to in order to build your country infrastructure. So these are the structural adjustment program, and what they tend to do is denationalize a lot of the industries and put them in private hands. So far they have not bear any significant fruits. Austerity. So that's another part of the neoliberal plan as well, because they claim that, newly independent African countries And when I say African, I mean in the Caribbean countries as well. They spend too much on healthcare and education, and they need to cut back on that. You know what I'm saying? So when you cut back on education and health, you're going to have devastating effect on the human being. So I mean, but capitalism don't care about the humanity, a human being. They want you to pay for healthcare and pay for education. So if you can't afford health, you will suffer, and if you cannot afford education, you will be dumb. That is how they operate. If you can't afford it, you can't access it, you can't get it. You don't deserve it if you can't afford it. So, and then this all leads to deindustrialization. So the manufacturing capacity is destroyed through forced market opening. So what there's not a part of the austerity program that they propose to African countries is where you now don't worry about making goods. You can actually get the goods from China or get the goods from America or Europe much cheaper than manufacturing it yourself. So therefore, you become dependent on these cheap goods that they're bringing to your economy, and then you have no base on which to manufacture. So the philosophy of consuming what you make what you consume is abandoned. So, and if you don't agree to opening up your market to these foreign goods, you are not entitled to these structural adjustment program. You're not entitled to benefit from these loans agreement, these trade agreements that they want to propose to you as a way to grow your economy. So this has been the live, and many African countries and the Caribbean countries has been functioning under this neoliberal policy that's been proposed to them over the last say 40 years or so. It's been going on now, 45 years they've been going through this, and yet all we saw is regress. We haven't saw any progress. Most of these countries, they barely have made any progress. It's been only in the hands of the few. The vast majority of the people that are still suffering from the effect of enslavement and colonization, and neocolonialism is still prevalent across Africa and the Afrobean. So structural adjustment program led to lost decades of industrialization and crushing debt. All it did was increase our debt burden, and it led to our country become more dependent on foreign goods and less dependent on our own manufacturing. So we don't manufacture what we need to produce because we're following these programs that was prescribed to these by these same people who are pushing capitalism on us, who are telling us that this is the best way to go, you know, promote the capitalist class, allow the capitalist class to thrive. But what they really do is they want to loan you the money so you can spend it on their capitalist company, the multinational companies. So instead of even giving it to your local people who want to be capitalists, they're going to spend it on companies that's created by these multinational companies, and they use local people as managers for these companies. So the money is actually being extracted, and your resources is being extracted out of your country. This is how these people work. And then you got to understand these elements. You know what I mean? Countries was forced to privatize essential services, cut social spending, open markets to foreign competition, whilst their own industries will still lay nascent or underdeveloped. This is the real failure that destroy African development prospect. This is the prescription that has been destroying African economies, and they want to blame it on socialism. Many of those African countries and the Caribbean countries today have been implementing the same system, and they have not bear much fruit. And many who is even showing any little light now, they have had to go through tremendous amount of sacrifice to see any meaningful progress. And it comes at the expense that we have to pay dearly and pay higher than everybody else. And still the economy is at the mercy of foreign multinational corporations and capitalist class. That is the truth, and that is the reality about our economy. That if they pull out, if they, if they impose sanction on us right now, we're in dire trouble. We're in danger. You know what I'm saying? We'll become so vulnerable to collapse because we're so dependent on foreign import of goods and services, even food, because we don't focus on self-sufficiency. We don't focus on building our own even light manufacturing base, our own agricultural base. We are focused on saying, okay, the big companies, then the big multinational companies, they manufacture at a tremendous level, huge, and they can now dump ton load and ton load of fruits and vegetables in your country. In many cases, genetically modified stuff that grow rapidly, grow big, and can last on the shelf much longer. And you're forced to have to sign these contracts to participate in their trade arrangement, to participate in their financial arrangement if you want to grow. So thereby, what they're doing in the process is stifling your sovereignty, eliminating your ability to be self-sufficient. We have to be careful of these so-called structural adjustment program pushed by the neoliberal forces. You can forget about the conservative forces and the MAGA forces. They have nothing to offer us. It's cutthroat, die-hard capitalism, every man for themselves. That's why I don't even mention them. They want to cut you off completely and leave you to die in the bush. That's how they operate. Either you serve them or you just become a footstool of them. That's how they work. The one them that Brendan and Uhuru supports. They care nothing about offering you any support. Matter of fact, they don't even care what you do. Just get out their way. Matter of fact, they want your resources. Just give them what they want, and they go and they don't want to pay a fair price for anything that you have. If you got oil, they want to come and claim it. If you got gold, they want to come seize it. If you got copper, uranium, they want it for themselves. And that is how these, especially these fascistic um, elements within the imperialist movement and the imperialist structure in this world, they do not care about your feelings. They do not care about your development. They don't care about your children. They don't care about nothing but profit and domination. At the very minimum, these neoliberal policies, they're trying to offer you a way out, a way away from socialism. But at the same time, they're still trapping you. They're still trapping you because you still got to cut healthcare. You still got to cut education. You got to cut anything that deal with helping people along the way, and charge them for anything that you provide in the society. You charge for it. That's why you go to some of the global south countries, and the commodities and the prices of goods are so expensive. You wonder, wow, a phone call is more expensive. Internet is sky high. The price of everything is so high because they want to put a premium charge on everything. They're taxing you on everything. So I say this because we have to give context to these people that are trying to criticize African socialism as failure without looking at the real failure. These neoliberal policies that they've been imposing on us. Now, let's look at a success story. Let's look at the Chinese example. Sovereignty in action. Did you know that since 1949, that China has lifted over 800 million people out of poverty using socialism, not capitalism? They don't just practice socialism, they practice socialism with Chinese characteristics, because China was also a communal society. Most non-European societies around the world were communal, where we share wealth together. We collectively grow. China was once a collective society. So they have embraced socialism with Chinese characteristics. And they have their own historical and cultural context, and they use it to achieve unprecedented development. And now China is the second largest economy in the world, you know? And China has over 40,000 plus high-speed rail. Imagine that, 40,000 kilometers of advanced rail network, more than the rest of the world combined together. 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail system across that country. And trust me, I've always talked about the transcontinental railway system in Africa. I look forward to that coming on stream. And I think that would produce trillions of dollars in value for African people across the continent. And most importantly, we must be in charge of that contract. We must be in charge of that manufacturing, that development, that implementation of that massive project that would connect the African countries there. Because none of this interconnecting of African countries was a consideration under colonialism. All they wanted to do was extract the resources to the coastal, to the ports, and get them into Europe and get them into America. So now we have the responsibility of connecting African countries, African communities together using all type of transportation network, from roads to ports to railway to airports. You know what I mean? And every other thing in between. Flying cars, drones, because we have to go full steam ahead with technology. So let's keep looking. So the lessons of sovereignty, what China did. China used the state planning to direct investment strategically. China also engaged global markets on its own terms. It maintained political sovereignty while integrating economically. China invested massively in education and infrastructure. It also protected strategic industry during development phase. You see, my people, being socialist minded, using socialism doesn't mean to be dumb. It's to be wise. It's to be strategic. It's to use very careful consideration when you're planning your economy. You direct investment strategically. You engage the global markets on your own terms. You maintain political sovereignty whilst integrating economically. So you're doing these things intentionally. You're not allowing the capitalists them to come in and bamboozle you. And you have to invest massively in education. And particularly us as African people, education is fundamental to us because we was forbidden from being educated for the last 400 years, 400 to 500 years. Education was something that was illegal for us. Practicing our culture was forbidden. So we need to massively invest in our culture and rebuilding our infrastructure. There should be no compromise on that. And also in our trading, we have to protect our industries. Industries that we develop internally as a people, we have to protect that. So what Africa must do? Develop socialism with African characteristics. See what China did? They developed socialism with Chinese characteristics. We must develop socialism with African characteristics. We must learn from both traditional communalism and modern success. We must be able to look back from the 1980s till now and look at the economies and says what worked. Even look into the 70s, what worked and what didn't work, why it didn't work, and we're trying to overcome those difficulties, overcome those issues that made us less successful than we should be. We use the state as a tool for collective development. The government is the most powerful institution in any country. And we must use that for our development. Because if we don't, the ruling class, the capitalist class, will use the government to develop that tiny minority in that country. the state will become a tool for the capitalist class. It will become a tool for the imperialist class for their own personal and individual development. We, the working people, the working class people, must utilize the state for our collective development, for our society to develop, our children to develop, and our elders to be taken care of, and our infrastructure to be built. We must resist colonial dictates from foreign institutions. We cannot just allow these neoliberal forces to dictate to us, or even these MAGA imperialists, ultra right wing, who want to dictate to us exactly what they want. I want your oil. I want your land. I want your resources, and we're coming in for it. We got to resist that at all costs. And we need to move towards rapid development, but through sovereign decision making. We cannot go this easy go lucky road. We cannot go this little piecemeal way. This, where we try to develop little by little and little here. We need rapid development. We need massive investment in education, massive development in our infrastructure because of our history. Because we were held back for so long, we have catch up to do. These European countries have had a free ride for the last 400 to 500 years. They have had a free reign, free labor, free land, free resources, or very cheap resources for a very long time. So they have a big lead on us at the moment. But for us to catch up, we cannot go the normal route. We have to invest massively, especially in science and technology and African culture. We should not compromise. We should not hesitate to invest all out in technology and science and in African culture if we want to survive. So yes, my people. So lessons learned from China. Sovereignty. That's the greatest thing. We need to claim our sovereignty as a people. These lessons is not just to copy China blindly. No. The lesson is sovereignty. China decided its own path, and African can and must decide on its own path. We don't have to be copying socialism from Europe or capitalism from America and Europe. We don't have to do that. We can use the state as a tool for our collective development. And when I say the state, I'm talking about the government, to achieve rapid development and resist exploitation. It can be done and must be done. See it? Reclaiming our rights to choose our own path. So, to address this issue about what is our obsession with socialism? Our obsession is with justice. Our obsession is with building a system where our elders are cared for, our children are educated, and the sick are healed, and communities thrive together, not just a few individuals in gated communities and gated estate, while the majority of us languish in poverty. That's not justice. This is what they want, where a handful of people will be living in the hills, living in these gated communities, driving in big cars and living in big lavish homes, while the majority lingers in poverty, in sickness, in ill health. What we're obsessed about sovereignty, controlling our own resources, our own dignity, and defining our own economic model. Excuse me. That's what we are obsessed with. You know what I mean? That is our obsession with socialism. And also, we're obsessed with our memory. We're reclaiming our culture, to our memory of who we are as a people. Sorry. A society must be built on communal obligation, not individual accumulation of wealth at the expense of the collective well-being of everyone. This is what we're obsessed with. Sovereignty, with justice, with our collective memory as a people, remembering who we are. And we should not feel ashamed to embrace socialism. We must study our history with clarity and refuse a manufactured guilt, to feel guilty about being African and to embrace African values and culture. We are a communal people as African people. What we have to invest in is science and technology and teach it to our children to solve African problems. We must celebrate Ujamaa. We need to honor the vision while learning from policy implementation mistake. We can learn from our mistake. We can understand Nkrumah's vision, the internal and external forces that undermine Pan-African unity. We have to be aware of that. We can study it right now in the Sahel state, in Burkina Faso, to see how they're trying their best to undermine what's building there, the socialist vision that is being built there. We must champion the spirit of Sankara. We must demand to know who assassinated him and why France supported the coup against the government of Sankara, and why they oppose to the government of Ibrahim Traore today. We must learn and we must adapt. We must build a better system for our contemporary challenges. We cannot sit back and wait, but we know that we can do better. Our mission is not to defend every leader's and every policy mistake. Our mission is to defend our rights, to experiment, to build, and to choose system aligned with our values. System designed to eliminate poverty, inequality, and exploitation. The path forward, our liberation continues. We must reject this so-called historical amnesia. The narrative pushed by critics like Search for Uhuru, Dynasty Mir, and Brendan on his channel they are dangerous narrative, and they are formed from historical amnesia. It asks us to condemn the only ideological framework that seriously challenged the Western capitalist system that enslaved and colonized us. That's what they want us to do. Turn around and condemn socialism. And socialism is the only ideological framework. African socialism is the only ideological framework that seriously challenged the Western capitalist system that enslaved and colonized us. We wasn't enslaved by socialism. We wasn't enslaved by communism. We wasn't enslaved by African values and systems. We was enslaved by Western capitalist system. We must refuse to accept this intellectual recolonization. Think boldly without fear. Our future requires us to think boldly, with clarity, without fear. We must reclaim socialism as an African concept, learn from global examples like China, and build economies that serve our people and not foreign interests. Our obsession is with liberation, and that will always continue until all Africans are free and prosperous. Socialism is more aligned with African values. We will not be ashamed for seeking economic system that is rooted in our cultural values. We will not apologize for resisting the very structure that exploited us. Our struggle for economic sovereignty is righteous, necessary, and far from over. I want to join us, my people. Share this narrative. Share this discussion. We must break away from the false narrative being spread. We must do a masterclass like this to dispel the negativity, to dispel the propaganda against our own interests. We must continue to have conversation in our communities and in online spaces. We must continue to study our history, because our history was denied from us. Our culture was cut off from us. But we still have a lot that we can turn to. There's still a lot for us to connect with. So we must deepen our knowledge with our African family across the globe. And we must organize. We must build movement for economic sovereignty and Pan-African movement. You must join an organization wherever you are. Meet at least once a week to discuss the issues facing our people. I want you to subscribe to this broadcast. Subscribe to this program. Clear Thinking with Brother Dulani. And I want you to also, if you can, to leave a comment. Tell me what you think about this. Tell me what you think about the assessment that I've made. This masterclass on refuting this idea that what is our obsession with socialism. Socialism is the only counterforce to Western imperialist and capitalist domination. There's no other force that can counter this wicked system of exploitation and inequality. We cannot be afraid of that which embraces the value of African people. Our value is to develop everyone, is to take care of our children and our elders, and to build a society where everyone can enjoy. That's not how the capitalist society works. It's a society, capitalist society is based on greed and damnation, and any development that takes place is a byproduct of their pursuit of profit. And that's how you get development in capitalist society. And plus, with the free labor that they have had for the last 400 to 500 years, and the stolen land and resources that they have accumulated, it have given them an advantage. And we have been put at a severe disadvantage. So make no mistake about it. African socialism is the best way forward for African people. Socialism with African characteristics is the best way forward, and we should not be ashamed to embrace socialism. We should not be ashamed to embrace African liberation and African culture wherever we are in this world. So I want to thank you once again for listening to another episode of Clear Thinking with Brother Dulani. Walk good, my people, and until next time. And big up Shakara from Kibunga Media. Ashe.